Joe in real life. Book review 5, Kurt Vonnegut, Cat's Cradle. I'm out in Forsyth Park walking around. I picked a little book because I've got 2 big books to start and I just wanted something unambitious to, fill in. And also, I like Vonnegut, he's an easy read. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you read it all, you probably know who Kurt Vonnegut is. And anyway, I thought it would be no problem. I thought I'd just blast through it and get started on something else. And I promised myself I wasn't going to give any bad book reviews. I'd just skip the review if that was the case. But, so this isn't a negative book review, but I gotta say my piece. I gotta say my piece on Cat's Cradle. First of all, if you've never read a Kurt Vonnegut book, highly recommend it. Really easy. You read it in a day probably. It's really fun. The style's fun. The story's fun. The science is fun. The characters are fun. It's relatively unambitious, and you should churn through it no problem. If you have read Vonnegut, like my favorite Vonnegut book is Galapagos, but also if you've read his, I think everyone's favorite, Breakfast of Champions or something in the same ilk, you're going to find Cat's Cradle tedious. It's just more of the same, but not as good. It's like stylistically the same, idea-wise the same, but less engaging. And this book should have taken me a couple hours to read at most. It took me days, man. I was bored with it. I didn't like any of the characters. I kept comparing them to the characters in Galapagos that I love so much. I think it's totally skippable. If you're a Vonnegut fan and you've read his big books and you're itching to pick up another Vonnegut book, you can skip Cat's Cradle. I know it's one of the big titles that people talk about with his name. It's not worth it, man. I just found it weak, That said, if you're not a big reader, there is nothing wrong with this book. Nothing. And if you're not a big reader and you're looking for a way to dip your toes into something, and you don't want something that's gonna you're gonna get caught in the weeds, you'll be out of your depth. This is nothing wrong with this book, You know what I did? You know what I compare it to? So I grew up in Maine, and everyone that grows up in Maine reads Stephen King. It's a rite of passage. You don't get to be a child in Maine and not read a Stephen King book. And you might start with something like Pet Sematary, which is a great place to start. It's a fantastic book. And then you'll churn through some other stuff, like maybe you read The Dark Half, maybe you read Misery, but sooner or later, you're going to pick up The Stand, or you're going to pick up Needful Things, or you might even pick up Under the Dome. And when you read one of these tomes, these 1,000-page Stephen King tomes, something happens, Then you try to pick up something like Salem's Lot afterwards, and it's unreadable. There's nothing wrong with Salem's Lot. But after you read The Stand, it's just what is this weak shit? I don't want this. I want The Stand too, And that's kind of how I feel about this. It's like I read Galapagos. I love me some Vonnegut. I read Galapagos, man. I was invested, And now I'm reading Cat's Cradle, and it's just like Galapagos light. And I'm not interested. It's just kind of lame. So that sucked for me. But if you've never read any Vonnegut, you want to pick up a Vonnegut. I think you really like Cat's Cradle. I really do. I think it's a quick and easy read that's very entertaining with some cool sci-fi like ideas in it and some relatively engaging characters in some interesting situations. There's no reason you won't like it. And I know I'm coming off kind of snobbish right now, but like, that's just how I feel, man. What are you gonna do? The heart wants what the heart wants. So that's it. That's my review of Cat's Cradle. Um, Nothing for it. I don't know what I'm reading next. I've got two big books and one little book I'm thinking about. Um, I'll fill you in later. All right, book review 5. This is Joe in real life. I love you guys. Be good to each other. I'm going to try hard to do the same.